Hi, everyone. Welcome to this event hosted by our Young Professionals in Development Network. We'll give 30 seconds or so to let people stream in. But if you're already logged on, please feel free to introduce yourself in the chat and we'll get started in just a couple seconds. Okay, so while we're waiting for a few more to join us this early evening or afternoon or morning, wherever you're joining us from, I will get started with just a little bit about SID-US for those of you who might be unfamiliar with our organization. Just to introduce myself, my name is Pablo Staez. I'm the Membership and External Affairs Manager here with SID-US. And as I was saying, for those of you who might not know us, we are the largest and most active chapter of the Society for International Development, which is an international network founded in 1957 to serve as a global forum dedicated to sustainable economic, social, and political development. In our work, we like to say that we serve as a global town square for the international development community, bringing together people from diverse organizations, disciplines, and career stages in this neutral, independent forum to share information and discuss important and relevant issues and challenges facing our community and the groups interested in it. There are several ways to get involved with us if this is your first event. One great way to stay in the loop is to sign up for our weekly newsletter and attend more upcoming events with SID-US. And you can check all of those out at our website, which is sid-us.org. We also have a few internship opportunities that we open up each cycle. So we have one coming up in the spring that goes through the summer. And we also have volunteer opportunities, which include our co-chairs. Those are those individuals who help plan and lead our work groups and our networks, as well as other volunteer opportunities, such as volunteering at our annual events, like our annual dinner coming up. We also encourage you to follow us on social media. We are at SID-United States on all of the platforms.
Thanks so much, Pebbles.
Oh, sorry, just one more thing, just to note for our attendees, we will be recording this session and sharing it publicly through our network and our social media channels. And live transcription closed captioning is available during this event. You can access that through your individual settings. And lastly, if you have any questions for our speakers or chairs, please use the Q&A box. And also please note if it is for a specific speaker, just to preface, we may not be able to answer all the questions given the time. However, we will try to get to all of them. And with that, I will pass it on to our co-chairs, Chizzy and Joseph.
Thanks. I was obviously so excited to get started. I jumped in there, Pebbles, so apologies. Good evening, afternoon, good morning. I am Chizzy Igwe. I formerly worked the Greater Washington Partnership, but more recently started a role at JP Chase in their corporate responsibility team, leading an effort around supporting women of color nationally and globally. I am been a co-chair for the Young Professionals Network for I think about 2.5 years, and I serve as a board member on the SID-US board of directors. It's a pleasure to be with you all tonight, and I am really looking forward to our conversation. Hope you all are as well. I will turn over to my co-chair, Joseph, to introduce himself as well.
Yes, and hello, everybody. My name is Joseph Zorkong, also co-chair of the YPN here at SID for just over a year now. I am a business registration specialist at FHI 360, which means I support, sort of projects in country to set up our operating platforms in those countries. I'm super excited about this topic. A few people have come up to me and sort of mentioned how timely it is in their current sort of decision-making process for their future. So I'm also excited for this event, and thank you for being here.
Great, and we're going to give just a brief overview of the session, do a quick poll just to get a pulse on how everyone's feeling and kind of where we all are at kind of in our own professional careers. And then we'll introduce our great panelists today. So as Joseph mentioned, the kind of genesis of this event was through conversations we've had with some of you all one-on-one, and through other events, we've heard that for those either new to development, pivoting into development, or seeking to kind of make a transition or a growth in their career, the question around should I go to grad school has come up to Joseph and I. And so we wanted to pull together a group of individuals who could speak to the question of whether graduate school might be a good step for you from a lived experience, from a human resources perspective, and from a higher education institution perspective. And so we're hoping through this panel that you all will be able to take away kind of the main questions you hopefully are or can be asking yourselves as you navigate this decision, and some resources and tips on how to think about the role of an advanced degree in pursuing your international development career. And just as a quick disclaimer, when we say development, it could also be international relations or affairs. So kind of the broader scope of the sector that focuses on kind of international relations. So with that, I'm going to turn it over to my colleague, Joseph, to get us kicked off with some poll questions.
And yeah, one thing you'll be seeing in school if you determine to go that route are lots of questions, lots of quizzes. So you won't have to worry. I don't think anyone will fail this, but we sort of just wanted to get a sense as to what are sort of some people's motivations for wanting to attend an event like this. So the first question there is, why are you attending this event? And then the second one is, many of us have, things that we're thinking about, issues, sort of maybe roadblocks that we might be considering. What's your biggest concern around the graduate school decision? So if you could take a quick minute and sort of respond to these questions, we'll reveal the results before we get started.
And we really appreciate you if you could participate. This will help our panelists be able to tailor kind of their advice and their responses for you all.
Well, and I think we have the results already. Let me expand this a little bit. So I don't know if everyone can see, I don't know if the panelists can see the results, but we have fairly close splits, at least for the first question, in terms of the rationale for people attending this event. And the same holds true for some of the concerns that people have. And of course, cost and affordability is always up there. And then, hand in hand, it goes hand in hand with sort of selecting the right graduate school. So thank you for this. I'm sure our panelists will find this helpful in determining determining how to answer some of the questions that we ask of them a little bit later on.
Thanks so much. And without further ado, I think Pibbles, we can pull up the slide. I do not want to bore you all by reading bios. So instead of we've asked Martina, Ben, and Elizabeth to introduce themselves, introducing their name, their organization, and their role, including what the organization does, and then answering, excuse me, a question about a piece of advice they would have given their younger selves as they begin. They're all still very young, but their younger selves as they began their career in development. So we can just go on the order of the names on the screen. And so Elizabeth, I'll pass it over to you.
Sorry, got to find that mute button. Well, hello, everyone. Excited to participate here today, and thank you for joining us. As you can see on the screen, I'm an executive recruiter for our global programs at the Bill and Melinda Gates Foundation. I've been here over 10 years now, so well acquainted with the field. In general, as I was thinking, kind of to the point of the questions we were asked to think about coming in to introduce ourselves, for me, coming into this sector and the foundation really was an opportunity to marry my personal and professional interests. So I'd sat on a number of boards and nonprofits in leadership roles, and I love talent and talent acquisition. So this is a great way to pull those together. It allowed me to contribute to something bigger than myself. And in many ways, I have an opportunity to contribute to the mission of the foundation, even through an operations role like HR and talent acquisition. In terms of what keeps me here and keeps me in the field, it might sound a little bit cheesy, but I in many ways, I'm helping people achieve their goals, their personal goals, their dreams, their dream jobs, their ability to give back and contribute to their home countries, and really to help solve some of these big, really challenging problems that the world is facing today. So, so it's a very altruistic effort for me in that way. Martina, I'll turn it over to you.
Thank you, Elizabeth, and thank you all for joining us today. It's a lot of fun for me to be on this panel and to share some insights with you. So my name is Martina Lines. I'm the Senior Director of Recruitment and Special Programs at Johns Hopkins School of Advanced International Studies, which we affectionately call SID-US. And we are actually in Washington, D.C. with campuses in Bologna, Italy, and Nanjing, China as well. I've been at SID-US for a really long time. I've been there for 16 years. I spent a decade in career services, and I loved that. I loved working with students and helping them launch their careers. But I never got to know the students until they were on their way out the door. So I joined the admissions team 6 years ago so I could be with them from the very beginning when they were just thinking about whether or not graduate school was the right choice for them, all the way through their programs, and then watching them go off into their careers. And I really consider it a privilege. And I will echo some of Elizabeth's comments. I know it sounds cheesy, but it really is wonderful to work with people who are truly committed to trying to make the world a better place. And that's why I've stayed so long at SID-US. And the connections run deep. I mean, Ben and I have a mutual colleague who he works with at Dahlberg, who was a student at SID-US and then taught some of our skills courses. So the world in IR is very small that way. In terms of the one piece of advice that I would have given my younger self, I'm going to cheat a little bit. I'm actually going to give you two pieces of advice because it goes hand in hand, or my younger self pieces of advice. And that would be, don't feel that a position that you really want is too far out of reach. If you believe that you have the capabilities to fulfill the duties of the role, go for it. Whether you have all of the skills and qualities that the employer is looking for, or just some of them, because I'll tell you what, people who have a lot of privilege, either from their gender or sex or whatever, they are not going to hesitate to apply for a position if they are only checking a couple of those skills off the block. Whereas people who are maybe a little more humble, or maybe, raised to be, to not believe that they should try for something unless they're fully skilled for it. They miss out. So that, and then what goes hand in hand with that is, don't be afraid to negotiate for a higher salary. And what I wish I would have understood when I was younger is that actually, in most instances, employers want to see that you have negotiating skills. So how are you going to prove that you have negotiating skills to those employers if you can't negotiate on your own behalf? So I will leave it with that and turn it over to Ben.
Hello, everyone. Nice to meet you all. Great to be with you. It's great to hear everyone else's perspectives and advice as well. I'm feeling a lot of alignment here. So myself, I'm Ben Wise. I'm an associate partner at a firm called Dahlberg Advisors. We are a global strategy consulting firm, and we focus exclusively on social impact clients and social impact projects. We were founded in about 2001 by some ex-McKinsey folks with the idea of bringing that McKinsey style of problem solving and rigor and analysis to the global development space. And we're now about 700 staff globally. We have the majority of my colleagues work in Africa and Asia and are based there. And Dahlberg Americas is about 100 staff. We work with governments, foundations, nonprofits, and corporations. And I think what originally attracted me to the global development space was really as a teenager. My father is a professor of global health at Stanford, and I grew up visiting rural clinics and community health worker programs in different parts of the world. And I think what keeps me in this space is really the complexity of the challenges and the kind of the thrill of making progress and moving the needle on some social challenge that that may have been previously regarded as intractable. And I think I've landed in a great place at Dahlberg to work on these kinds of things. I'm looking at Chizi, who was for a while a colleague of mine at Dahlberg. We got to work on some interesting things together. But yeah, the projects are extremely varied. Where like one day it might be working for the government of Ethiopia on their digital transformation strategy. Another day might be figuring out how to bring a new malaria drug to market, or figuring out what's wrong with the ethanol value chain in Madagascar. So it's really varied, but a lot of opportunities to really dig into some of these big global challenges. And in terms of advice, I think, Martina, I was aligned with you. I think it would be something like, don't be scared, and you said, don't be afraid to apply to that job. That might be a stretch. I think mine is even more upstream. Like, I think I was afraid to picture myself in some of these, sitting in a certain chair or working on this kind of work in this particular space. So that would be one. The other piece is I was very naive about markets and economics for early in my career, and it was a very slow unfolding for me to really understand how much those elements matter in shaping the world around us. At least that's my perspective. So that would be my advice.
All right. Thank you very much, panelists. Elizabeth, Ben, and Martina, we really appreciate some of your perspectives so far on these issues. And I guess we'll just jump right into some of the questions, right? And you guys all bring up a lot of really good points as to, some rationales for joining, for going to grad school. And I think the first question is why choose to pursue a degree why choose to pursue a graduate degree in the first place, right? What are some of the pros and cons in doing so? We all hear of some of the reasonings why people are sort of thinking about it, whether it be a return on investment or it be trying to advance your career some way, or it might sort of even be financial. What are some of the common issues that you run into? And if you can give sort of some pros and cons for selecting a graduate career, we would appreciate that. And to that end, sort of, what are some questions that you should be asking yourselves to sort of make that decision an even better one? So if you could just sort of answer those two questions in a bit, we'd appreciate that. And that's sort of open to everyone on the panel. Ben, since you had ended it off, I'll start with you.
Yeah, so what are some reasons to choose to pursue a graduate degree? I think for me, and I don't know that this needs to be the reason for everybody, but I think a lot of folks that I've seen who have made the most of a grad school experience is it's a great opportunity to pivot. If you are trying to get from one space to another, either within the global development space or get into the space from another space, it's a really great opportunity to do that. You have an opportunity to be immersed in the content and the subject matter and take those courses and learn about the topic. And also, you know, generally there are many opportunities to get involved on the job as well through internships, et cetera. And folks are always really willing to speak with a student, so you can kind of call up a lot more people than you might have otherwise been able to call up as well. So I think that's kind of key. The other sort of piece that I would share on this is, you know, I've done a bit of advising of MBA students, and I'll say this, there's only a very subtle difference between well, I'll just stick to MBA students, who a student comes to you and says, I have no idea what I want to do. And another one who says, I have 5 ideas of what I want to do. It's pretty much the same thing, because 5 is just too many things, but the latter is so much more proactive and forward leaning. And so I would say, think about what you want to do with this degree or that degree, talk to people who have done that and try to figure out and validate what that path looks like. And don't worry about closing doors, because you might find something that's viable or that's attractive to you or not, but you don't have to necessarily stick with it. You can always switch to something else. So don't be afraid to explore it. That's my 2 cents.
Thank you. And Martina, you have a pretty unique perspective with students who come in through your office, or who might, you know, call you to ask you what some of the requirements are to go to SICE. What sort of reasons do you see for people wanting to advance their careers through a graduate degree?
So, you know, I think Ben did a great job of talking about pivoting. We do see a lot of that. In fact, we see a lot of people who come to SICE who already have a master's degree. Most often it is people who maybe jumped right from undergrad to grad school without really spending any time in the workforce to really flush out what it was they wanted to do. And then they woke up one day and realized, geez, this isn't what I want to do. And then they come to us to pivot. Sorry, that's a giant dog coughing in the background. So that's a reason, but also, and this is particularly true, I think, in the Washington, D.C. metro area, where it seems like even the most entry-level job now requires a master's degree. So a lot of people are hitting that ceiling, and they realize that either to get the job that they want, or if they want to advance in the job that they currently have and seek promotion or higher salary, they really need to have an advanced degree. And sometimes it's because people are seeking to round out their skill set. So maybe they have developed some skills and some talents in some areas, but they're lacking either in breadth or depth of knowledge, and they're looking to sort of deepen their subject matter expertise. But one final thought I'll have on this is, another really compelling reason to go to graduate school is because of the networking opportunities that grad school opens up for you. It's not just networking with the faculty, although that's a huge piece of it, but it's networking with alumni who've gone to the school. It's networking with your classmates. It's just a tremendous way to really, you know, broaden that network. And then some of the questions that you'd want to ask yourself in deciding whether or not grad school is the right thing for you. First of all, I would say, have I worked long enough in this to know what I really want to do, to figure out my career goals? And if I have, will a graduate degree help me achieve them? Is there a path for me to achieve those career goals without a graduate degree? And these are all questions that are important to ask. Is the timing right? And then, of course, big questions like, what program is best for me? And should I do a master's, or should I go right into a PhD program? These are all key questions. Another key question is, do I want to continue working full time and then consider pursuing the school part-time, or do I want to fully, you know, jump in, take a leave from work and be a full-time student? And then I think maybe the last question would be, where do I want to be geographically, and where does it make sense for me to be? Where are the types of jobs that I want to pursue Does it make more sense for me to be in a city where I can more easily access those as I start searching for a job after grad school? And one note on that, I will just throw out there, while of course I'm with the US grad school, I think if I were considering graduate degrees, I wouldn't limit myself just to the US anymore, because there are a lot of excellent graduate programs globally, and many of them are now taught in English. So you don't necessarily need to know the language of the country in which you're pursuing a degree.
Thank you. And lastly, Elizabeth, what are you seeing from organizations like the Gates Foundation? I'm sure an organization that many people want to get into, and an organization with plenty of jobs that I think require graduate degrees. What are you seeing that people might be asking themselves if they want to get into an organization like Gates Foundation and think that they have to go through a graduate degree in order to do so?
Yeah, absolutely. And it builds a lot on what Ben and Martina have already offered up. I think it should be thought through in many ways as a lever to where you want to go. I actually really like, Martina, the recommendation on exploring outside of the US. A lot of international development doesn't always happen in the US. There's a lot of opportunities outside of the US. And so not limiting yourself, I think in that regard is really important. I also think this discussion around, and I know it came up a little bit, I saw it in the chat here, around gaining some of that work experience or that applied experience to know if this is the right direction for you. I think this group, we chatted about this a little bit last week, and I think that combination of work experience plus your, I hate to use this word, but credentials is important. The other thing I would add is really just be honest with yourself about the reasonings why you're looking at this, right? We've talked about many of them here, but I really like Ben's suggestion as well of talking to people that may be in that program or may be in the sector or a type of job that you're looking to get into, to really understand the value of that pathway. It's not just a financial investment, it's a time investment. And so thinking through how you're going to prioritize it, given the effort and the commitment that an extra degree or multiple degrees require, I think is really important.
Thank you for that, Elizabeth. And I should mention there have been some great questions that are coming in that I'll save to the end to sort of pose to our panelists. But really quick, I'll go back to you, Ben. And it looks like you made the leap to go to graduate school. In fact, you've got yourself an MBA. And for anyone in the crowd who might be wondering, what type of degree I should get to stay in this space, can you sort of walk us through where your mindset was, what sort of questions you were asking yourself, and why it was that you applied to get your MBA, and how you find yourself back in international development? I know you talked about it a little bit in your introduction, but could you just expound a little bit on that?
Sure. Thank you, Joseph. I think coming out of undergrad, I was very naive in a few areas. In particular, well, let me just tell you, my first job out of college, I was working for a community-based organization, a nonprofit that built affordable housing on the south side of Providence, Rhode Island. And they sent me to an Excel training to kind of learn how like a real estate model works, because we were supposed to be building affordable housing. And I was going through the exercise and so on. And I remember I like raised my hand and asked the facilitator, I'm like, hey, I think I might have did mine wrong. There's like money left over. And I thought like, we're supposed to be a nonprofit. So like, what is this money that's left over? And then like the person very, charitably was kind with me and patient and explained to me that like, a nonprofit has to like make money and make revenue over here to pay their people over there, and et cetera, and just all these really basic things about how organizations work that I was just completely oblivious to. And I just had this kind of like oh kind of moment. And that was, one on a series of like aha moments, just learning about how markets worked. This happened to be in 2007, and the whole housing market came tumbling down in 2008. And I happened to be working in it. And so I learned a lot about like the consequences of markets. There are really winners and losers in this kind of thing. And so this was like my slow journey to try where I wanted to learn more about how markets and economics, affected this world around me, and why people are rich and poor and all these things. And the other kind of strand of it was that I worked for a few different nonprofits, both like global focus and domestic focus at that time. And I had seen a lot of pockets of dysfunction in these organizations, and I knew enough to say, I'm not sure it has to be like that. This doesn't need to be quite so terrible, but I didn't know enough to basically like prescribe any kind of solution. And so this kind of questioning, does it need to be that way, led me to an interest in sort of organizations and how they work on that side too. And this kind of thought process led me to business school. Earlier on, I was considering a number of different grad school programs. I was an urban studies major in undergrad, and I thought maybe I wanted to do a master's in urban planning or some kind of global development degree. And I think it was just through speaking with people that had done these programs or were in these programs, what they were learning about, what the career paths were, and what they were planning to do after. And I was really attracted to this career path into consulting. I met a lot of smart ex-consultants that were working in global development. And I said, maybe I want to grow up to be like you someday, or, or learn about what you're learning at least, even if not, be like them. And that's sort of how I was led toward business school.
Great. Thanks so much, Ben. Very, very helpful. We're going to pivot a bit over to Elizabeth. And earlier in your intro, Elizabeth, you mentioned kind of the sweet spot being the credentials you have paired with the work experience you have. And building a bit more on Joseph's question and his framing around the Gates Foundation being, a heavily sought after opportunity, but even beyond the Gates Foundation, if we think about international relations more broadly, can you speak to, as a recruiter or someone who's looking at hundreds and thousands of candidates per year, how a grad degree does or does not actually improve one's chances of landing the coveted role that they're going after?
Yeah, it's a really good question, and I would counter it with patience and persistence, regardless of the outcome. I think in many ways, listen, at the end of the day, I believe, at least I'll speak from a foundation perspective, and Joseph, you touched on this, many of our opportunities here, an advanced degree or a master's degree, MBA, is something that we look for. It can be required if it's a more technical role where it may even need to be a PhD, or it's strongly preferred. And in that way, an advanced degree can give someone an edge, right, in a recruitment process over someone that perhaps might not have it, all other things being equal. But I would say there's a number of factors that go into consideration when making a hiring decision. And so in my experience, again, going back to this, I know our intention here is that should I go to school or not go to school? I think at some point you have to think through, and Ben touched on this, what are you planning to do after that degree, right? Is it going to be beneficial? Because there are roles where an advanced degree may be helpful, but it's not going to be the determining factor of why you do or do not get a job. So I think in many ways, it's that, again, I'm going back to the combination of education and training. So that it's, what are you doing with that degree? What are you doing with that learning that you get and the skills that you get from going back to school, and bringing that forward? Employers want to still know at the end of the day what you've done. And so tying that into what some of your objectives are. And listen, I'm not a planner. I see 10 years out, but at the end of the day, how is this degree going to benefit me? And being clear on what some of those objectives are, even if they're short-term and more immediate in nature, I think will be important.
No, that makes sense. I think what I'm hearing is that just some like level setting
Yeah.
and internal reflection is key before you start even questioning around what program. It's just kind of like, what do I want to do? And making sure you're not making like well, my friend went to school, so I guess I'll do it too.
100% cheesy. And I think it's not just, well, my friend went, or this is what I think needs to happen because I'm in international development and everybody goes to get, goes and gets an MPH, for example. I think it's being a little more intentional than that when one's thinking about this and how a degree can help. We are seeing, I'll just put this plug out there, and kind of building on Ben's reasoning for an MBA, at least we are seeing a little shift towards bringing some of that business acumen in. It's not going to apply for all, particularly if you're in a more technical or scientific area of development. But I think there's a lot of pathways one can go, and I think it is doing some of that self-reflection on there's breadth. There's a lot of different ways that degrees can support your career in international development. So it does require, I think, a little reflection on what you want to do.
Thanks so much, Elizabeth. We're going to pivot to Martina. And Martina, you mentioned something in your intro around kind of the cost piece. You said there's the decision around full-time or part-time, which has an implication on, your income stream. You've talked about cities, and so moving to a certain city like a DC or New York has different cost implications than a Chicago or a smaller city. And I was someone who did a graduate degree abroad in China largely because it was free, and I wasn't particularly interested in student loan debt at that time. I don't know that anyone is. So could you speak a bit more to the question around affordability and kind of what options people have or what suggestions you may have for students as they think about how to manage the financial aspects of pursuing a graduate degree?
Sure, thanks, Cheesy. So first, let me just say that please don't assume that grad school is going to be out of reach because tuition is so high. What's very different with grad school than undergrad is that there tends to be scholarship money available. And in the IR space, so the schools that we work with, similar to SIDE, almost all of us offer pretty generous scholarship programs. So what I would really recommend is make a short list of the schools that you're interested in and do some research and see whether or not they offer internal scholarships and what the criteria are. At many grad schools, the scholarships tend to be more merit-based than need-based, but some of them do take need into consideration. So check that out. You'd be surprised. I mean, I know at SIDE, for example, we have a scholarship program for students who are interested in serving the public good. So it's broader than public sector, it's public service. So it would include people who wanted to work in international development. You apply to that simultaneously with the degree program. And for example, our 2-year sort of flagship Master of Arts in International Relations, if you're accepted into that and the scholarship program, it's a full ride. So there are other schools that have generous scholarships too. And as Cheesy mentioned, there are schools in some countries that are completely free. They used to be free in Scandinavia too, and they got smart and now they're charging a little bit of tuition, but there are lots of funding opportunities out there. Another little tip I will give you is if you have a top choice school, but another school has offered you more money than your top choice, go to your top choice school and tell them, I really want to go here, but this school gave me X dollars. They're going to want to see proof. So make sure you've got that email ready, but chances are they will be willing to match that. So don't be afraid to do that. And then I would also say, look to outside organizations as well. Don't just depend on the school for the full cost of attendance. There are external scholarships. A lot of them are just waiting for people to apply to them because people don't take the initiative to search for scholarships. There are a couple that I will point you all to. One in particular is the Donald Payne Scholarship Program. It's for U.S. students who are seeking careers in international development as foreign service officers with USAID. And they provide really generous benefits, not just for tuition, but also for a living stipend. And their application deadline, if you're interested for fall 2023, is November 4th. So you still got some time to work on that application. And then I'll also point you to APSIA.org, APSIA. That's the Association of Professional Schools of International Affairs, of which SIDE is a part, as is, you know, a lot of our peer schools. And they maintain a list of scholarship resources. So check that out. And then, of course, there are, you know, federal loans and that sort of thing. Once you're done, if you do end up going into the public sector, there's the Public Service Loan Forgiveness Program that you can look into. And then just sort of as a final thought, I'll just tell you also that, you know, it's important to do a cost benefit analysis on this, right? And I would say, look at some of the jobs that you wish that you could apply for because they require a master's degree. See what the salary level is for those positions. And then you can do an easy calculation of, you know, the cost that you're putting into your education. How quickly would you realize a return on that investment given that?
Thanks so much, Martina. One thing I wanted to add is also looking at your employers. I know some employers have tuition reimbursement programs. I know consulting is a field in which it's a common offering to go to support a graduate degree program. Sometimes there's stipulations around which schools those are, and there's often stipulations around how long you have to work at that firm once you graduate. So looking into employers is another option. And then kind of stepping back a bit, and this is a question for Martina, Elizabeth, and Ben. There's been a lot of kind of shifts, kind of macroeconomic or just societal shifts that are happening, conversations around skills-based hiring, employers making a move to identifying skills versus credentials. I think there's the Great Resignation and changing attitudes towards working and how much you're investing in that. There's rising education costs, and like in the U.S., we don't have we don't really have free school the way other countries do. There's a greater emphasis, I think, among employers to diversify their talent pipelines and look at different schools or look at even different backgrounds and makeup. So amidst kind of all of those kind of dynamics, in your opinion and from your perspectives, what is the value, or how do people kind of make sense of the graduate school decision vis-a-vis kind of all those sometimes competing factors or realities in our society? And feel free to jump in or come off mute.
You want to jump in, Martina,
Elizabeth,
and then I'll
and
go?
then
Oh, go ahead, Elizabeth. I'll follow.
Yeah, it's a really good question, Cheesy, and I think it's one that on some level is it's a really personal decision. We are definitely experiencing this shift towards more skill-based hiring. We talk a lot at the foundation about lived experience, and that doesn't mean necessarily, for example, that that's a broad definition. That could be you're deeply entrenched in the context and realities of a particular sector or country. It could be that you have spent a significant amount of time there. So there's a balance there in our definition of lived experience. And clearly we've thought about this for a long time, diversified talent pipelines. But I don't see the need for an advanced degree, if it's truly required, completely going away. And I know we've talked a lot today, some themes about intentionality, doing your homework that might sound a bit overwhelming. But I think at the end of the day, if you do some of that, it's only additive. And I do think and I mentioned this earlier, it can really give an edge in a hiring process, particularly if the type of job, the type of role that you're going after, career that you're going after puts value on that. So I think it is understanding where even amongst changing attitudes, there's still certain sectors, there's still certain types of jobs that still require that additional training, whether it's technical. You could be, it doesn't have to be just on the science side, it could be in a functional field like measurement, learning, and evaluation, right? That's really steeped in methodology, that those advanced degrees are still important. But I think it comes back to considering how it's going to benefit your growth, your career ambitions, and really and taking the time to do some of that reflection and introspection.
Thanks so much. Martina, I know you wanted to add a few comments as well.
Thank you. Yes, and I agree with Elizabeth. I don't think the need for a master's is going to go away, but I do think it's important to be very deliberate in your evaluation of schools and make sure that they're offering not just the academic coursework, but the opportunity for you to have those experiential learning opportunities and also skills-based training. So that's what brought me to SIDE 16 years ago. I stood up a skills courses program for them. So on top of the academic courses, students can take short-term courses in consulting skills and project management and monitoring and evaluation and spreadsheet modeling and you name it. There are about 30 different courses offered, how to deliver a briefing, how to write a speech. And these skills are, we have students tell us time and time again that what landed them the job was not the degree necessarily, but the fact that they could point to those specific skills courses they had taken.
Shiza, you're muted.
Sorry, I said, Martina, thank you so much for that, especially that piece about the skill building. And I wanted to see, Ben, if you wanted to add anything before we went on to our next question.
I can tell you that, I think the math still works for grad degree. If you look at what the salaries are for the thing you want to study, and I can sort of speak more specifically for MBAs, and I think at the time when I went, I had a lot of colleagues. The set that I ran with were a lot of folks who had worked in social impact before business school, wanted to come to business school and work in either banking or consulting or some more traditional career, even product development or tech, for a couple of years and get that private sector experience, exposure, skill set, and then bring it back to the social sector. And I can, now a number of years later, I can tell you that those of us that pursued that pathway ended up in, great positions. I think that that's one thing that I think at the time that I went was a hot topic, was how to kind of structure your career that way. And to tell you now from, on the recruitment, like on the other side of the table, interviewing candidates and so on, we love that because it's someone who has exposure to the social sector as well as like hard skills in an area, and we can look at their resume and kind of really understand that they bring that. And so we call it unicorn. So you can sort of craft your path to make yourself into one if you know what it is you want to do. But also, I mean, I think a grad program is also a great opportunity to explore. So I think a lot of people, they go in with a theory and then they feel free to explore from there. Yeah, I think from a higher, from a recruiter standpoint, I would say that folks that have a grad degree, I think all else equal, I tend to see a little bit more breadth of knowledge from them. They understand more about the ecosystem or different sectors and how those different pieces of the puzzle fit together. And some of it's from taking classes and some of it's from networking, but a lot of it is just your classmates. You get to know people who came from one path and they're going to do something else, and got to know them and you had to do your math homework together or your econometrics homework together, and you kind of figured out what they know about, figured out your complementary skills. I think all else equal, folks bring that when they have been through a grad program.
Thank you, Ben. And I'm conscious of time. I know we left about 10 minutes towards the end for questions and answers, but I had one last quick question that Martina sort of picks up on some of the things that you had mentioned in terms of things that might either fall outside of an advanced degree or that might complement an advanced degree, that might help someone sort of bolster or impact their ability to advance their careers. So this is an open question to everyone. Are there things out there that you might recommend, or are there people or other resources out there that you might recommend to people in sort of helping them make this decision on how to advance their career that falls outside of an advanced degree or even in complement of it?
I can jump in there. And Joseph, if it's okay, I'm going to combine my response with one of the questions that was posed in the chat box from Katie. Katie asks, as somebody who just didn't, jumped right in, any advice for those of us who missed out on networking opportunities? And what I would say is, don't underestimate the power of LinkedIn, right? So for you specifically, Katie, listen, you can go on LinkedIn and you can do a cross search for your undergrad, for graduates from your school that are working in the organizations that you're targeting, and you can send them a message on LinkedIn and just say, hey, I'd love to do an informational interview and hear about your career path. People are always happy to offer advice. They don't want you to hit them up for a job, but they're happy to offer advice. So really use LinkedIn to your advantage. And that's another really great way to position yourself. If you don't have a master's degree, have a really strong LinkedIn profile and become somewhat of a thought leader in your field or your area of specialization on LinkedIn, and share helpful articles that then others are going to pass on, and sort of build a name for yourself that way.
I can jump in and build on that. Yes, be careful on the hitting up for direct jobs. If I could just plus one that as a recruiter. Always happy to chat and have informationals, but apply if you're interested, if it's open. The other thing I would add is think of, maybe I'll say two things just in the interest of time. One, think about things that you might be currently doing, whether it's in your school program or in your day-to-day job around projects, special projects. Don't forget about the on-the-job learning and training that one can receive, and also consider taking on some of those projects or raising your hand that it might not fit in the lane of your day-to-day job, but it's going to give you exposure. It's going to help you build an additional skill set. So for example, I don't have startup experience, but I was able to help lead the talent acquisition strategy for one of our startups with the foundation, one of our newly stood up subsidiaries, because I raised my hand. So raise your hand, take on some of those special projects that that might seem a stretch or outside of your day-to-day. The other thing I would offer up, and we've talked a lot, I totally support the networking, the things we're doing today, the association participation, including participating in local chapters. Think about internships and fellowships as well. They definitely demonstrate interest. They gain you some practical experience, and they're good secondments as well. They're good opportunities to help build out that toolkit, if you will.
Thank you. I think, should we just hop on to Q&A really quick, Cheesy?
Yeah, I would just add one thing on Elizabeth's point around opportunities. I think boards are a great way. A lot of boards I know have spots specifically for young professionals. And so you get to learn a lot more about what that organization does, and learn their HR, their strategic, you learn the whole breadth of running an organization, and you get to network with fellow board members. And if you're the young professional, oftentimes these board members will be a lot more experienced than you, can offer their advice and their connections where it makes sense.
And leadership opportunities too, Cheesy. That's one of the huge ways I gain leadership experience personally.
Same here. I know we had a question in the group chat from a young woman asking about
So there's a
Jenna
question.
Davis.
Yeah, did you see that?
Around, she is a second-year grad school student, and she's entering the job market in the spring, and she's asking about any kind of general advice as someone about to embark on that. And Jenna, if you're able to add a bit more context, it says you're interested in working for a constancy agency, and I'm familiar, but perhaps Martina, Elizabeth, or Ben, you're familiar with that.
Did you mean consultancy? Of course, the consultant would do that.
Perhaps. So Jenna, feel free to jump in if you have additional questions, but any advice for someone who's general advice for someone about to embark into the workforce? And also, I will say other folks, if you have questions, please pop them in the chat and we'll feed them to the panelists.
I'm happy to jump in, maybe just a couple comments briefly. One, +1, the LinkedIn. Don't forget about your public profile there. 2, there's still a lot of well, I shouldn't say inconsistency, that's not fair. There's a whole number of ways to craft a resume these days. And so 1, it's okay to have multiple resumes depending on the kinds of opportunities you're going for. I would also say, depending on the kind of experience that you have, the years of experience that you have, and Martina, let me know if you all are saying something different, but don't limit yourself to page numbers, any of those kind of things. Like, be thoughtful in how you're positioning your experience. And last plug I would say is everything on your resume is fair game. So if you don't want to talk about it, be thoughtful about how you put it on there. So just a couple tips from the recruiter.
Okay, we have
I can
so go ahead,
jump in.
Martina.
I would say, if you haven't already, Jenna, make sure you're connecting with the career coaches at your school, and meet with a couple of them and see which one you feel most comfortable with and has the most expertise in the types of industries you're looking to enter. Think about what sector you really want to be in, and that can help you sort of refine your job search. And network like mad. Connect with alumni from your grad school and let them know that you're interested in a job similar to theirs and seek advice from them. If you have a mentor, engage your mentor in helping you strategize and think through where you might want to seek opportunities. It's actually a pretty good market right now. There are a lot of opportunities. So I would really, though, starting with your career services team would be the best advice I could give you.
Great, thanks so much. We have another question that came in, and I apologize if I mispronounced your name, Saif. The question was, would you recommend pursuing a graduate degree abroad, Europe or the UK, or is it better to keep to US schools? This is if you have an end goal of working in the DC development space.
I'll jump in again. So really, I think it comes down to your risk tolerance for cost, maybe, because certainly if you want to end up in the DC area, it makes great sense to go to a graduate school in DC because you can begin that networking on day 1 and you don't have to wait until you graduate. And that's really tough to do from abroad. But if it's the only way you feel you can finance your studies, then that's another consideration. But typically I would say, we have campuses in Bologna and Nanjing. And when prospective students ask me, should I go to the Bologna campus or the DC campus? I ask them, well, where do you want to end up? And if they tell me they want to end up at NATO in Brussels, I will tell them, well, go to the Bologna campus. That makes more logistical sense, right? So no easy answers there.
Thanks so much. Elizabeth?
I was just going to build on that. I think it's fair to ask questions of where do alumni go? Where are, especially if you're looking for a specific program, because I would agree with Martina, the potential opportunity to start that networking, to gain exposure even through your school program, to the local ecosystem in DC. There's a lot of benefit I would think in the short term on that might make the path a little bit easier of a landing when you come out of your program. But if your true interest is to go abroad, then think through how are those schools or those programs feeding back into certain areas that you're looking to go into, and is there any geographical themes to that?
Thanks so much. And Ben, I saw you come off of mute.
I saw that the Jenna's question was about consultancies, so I guess I can try to speak to this. I think just very technically, I think be aware of the dates, because probably each firm does have some sort of structured round for recruitment, and you may know, and others may know, a lot of consulting firms use what we call case interviews as part of our interview process, and I think this is a good test to see if you might like the job. The idea is you sit with your interviewer, and the interviewer will share a prompt to think through some kind of problem or topic. At Dahlberg, we use past projects that we've worked on, and we say, you know, how would you think about figuring out what's wrong with the ethanol market in Madagascar? And then we kind of do some thought experiments together. At Dahlberg, we really push ourselves to make the process accessible to folks who are not familiar with that process, haven't been through it before, but it is useful to practice. And if you hate it, you'll probably won't enjoy the job very much. So I would throw that out there. I will say that, and I mentioned this earlier, you know, I ran with a crowd who went to business school with nonprofit backgrounds and then did go back to the social sector after a couple of years in consulting. And I will say that in general, like, that profile is very attractive to international organizations. I spent 4 years at the International Rescue Committee. I was part of starting up an internal strategy unit, and there were about 12 of us, and many of us had consulting, you know, private sector consulting in our backgrounds, and it made us very effective at certain things that was really useful to the organization. But same thing, like if you think you're going to hate consulting, you'll probably hate that you get asked to do as an ex-consultant later. You know, if you hate rigorous analysis and you hate slides and communicating in PowerPoint, then you know, don't torture yourself. Those are my thoughts.
Yeah, and if I could build, Ben, thanks for picking that up, because I didn't want to just jump in, but if this is helpful, this is a great example of this seems to be the pathway to get into certain organizations or certain roles. Let me share with you why it's an attractive profile at the foundation. And Ben, you touched on some of these. It's the skills that one develops. I'm going to go back to that earlier question about hiring for skills. For us, it's things like the structured problem solving. It's the critical thinking capabilities, the analytical thinking capabilities. So, you know, it's part of thinking through what is it about that profile and that set of experiences that someone gets coming from a consulting agency. I would 100% agree. If you practice a case style interview and you don't like it, you don't push yourself in that route, because you will get pulled into the strategy projects. You'll get pulled into the analytical analysis, and definitely we'll be creating decks. So definitely we'll be creating decks.
Yeah, but you might try it and you might be like, hey, this is kind of
you
fun.
might
So,
love.
in which case,
yeah.
Fly to Dahlberg too, come on.
Yeah.
Thanks so much. I think in the interest of time, we can take one more question. I think one just maybe came in. Oh no, Jenna was saying thank you. Any other questions? Martina came off of me, so maybe while we wait for any additional questions, please feel free to share, Martina.
Sure. I just wanted to mention something that we haven't discussed, but Ben has mentioned he has an MBA. I'm sure a lot of you are considering degrees that would give you the international development type of coursework that you're interested in. Consider a joint degree. There are many schools that offer joint degrees. So at SIDE, for example, you can get a joint degree. You can get your MBA from Wharton or UVA's Darden School and get your Master of International Relations from SICE, and you shave time off of both degrees so that in 3 years, you're earning 2 degrees. And I will tell you, because I used to compile the employment outcome statistics, we would have to pull out the average starting salaries for our joint degree students because they skewed everything so much, whether it was a joint degree with an MBA or a JD or an MPH. So if you really love school and you have the ability to spend 3 years and study, you might want to consider a joint degree.
Thank you so much. I didn't see any additional questions come in, and I'm cognizant that we're about 6 minutes over. So with that, I think we'll close first by saying a big thank you, Martina, Elizabeth, and Ben, for not only your time, but the great advice you provided. I think I personally took a lot of notes for myself, and I think Joseph would say the same, and we hope that our attendees can relate. And then thank you to everyone who logged on and listened and asked great questions. The recording will be available online probably in a week or so, and so feel free to share this with people you know who may have not been able to participate in today's session. And then I think thirdly, in the stream of kind of Martina's advice, I would recommend that you all hop on LinkedIn and connect with Martina, Elizabeth, and Ben to start building your network. And if you are interested in developing a relationship with them. Martina, I saw you came off of mute.
Yeah, I can't believe I forgot to throw this out there and offer it. But if any of you want to discuss graduate programs and you're thinking through your options, I am more than happy to schedule time to meet with you via Zoom or phone call, or you can drop by SIDE. So I will share my email address in the chat box.
Thank you so much, Martina.
Sure. And I'll give you a little hint that if you are considering SIDE, sign up to attend one of our information sessions. And if you attend, you get an application fee waiver. So there's literally no risk to applying.
Those add up. So I would
Really
definitely take advantage of that. And then lastly, a quick announcement. So I shared that I've been co-chair to the YPN for about 3 years, and today is my last event with the network. So we are doing an open call for volunteer opportunities. So as Elizabeth mentioned, ways to build your leadership and skill set. If you are interested in applying for the co-chair role, if it's not up already, it will be up in the coming weeks. And feel free to reach out to me if you have questions about my experience as a co-chair. And then obviously reach out to Joseph, who will be your co-chair if you want to learn a bit more about his experience and about him as well. So that's it.
I cannot be any more sadder about that. She's been an incredible sort of mentor, to be perfectly honest with you. Since this is my first time really in international development, and I can't imagine where this will be next year. But yeah, once that person is selected, they'll have massive shoes to fill. But I just want to thank you for everything you've done for SID-YPN, and of course for me. So very much appreciative of that, Cheesy.
You're very welcome. And I think next year, I know it'll be even bigger and better. So thank you to everyone. I think Malva could put the link in the group chat, and feel free to reach out. And I hope everyone has a great evening.
Take care, everyone.
Thanks, everyone.